Hello and welcome to the Living Your Best Life webinar series presented by the Huntsman World Senior Games. This is a monthly webinar that covers a wide variety of topics that's designed to help you live your best life. My name is Kyle Case, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Games. Our presenter is Dr. Matt Townsend, who happens to be the founder of Townsend Relationship Center, as well as its affiliate firms, which are Capacity Consulting and Townsend Relationship Center. Dr. Townsend is also an author, and his book, Starved Stuff, The 7 Basic Needs of Healthy Relationships, is a popular pick among those searching to better their relationship skills. On top of that, he has many online programs available for marriage, dealing with anxiety, as well as parenting. Dr. Townsend, welcome.
Hello, thanks. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, we are excited. It's just wonderful to be with you and to learn from you. I'm looking forward myself to figuring out the ABCs of strong mental health and how to live a good, happy life. So really looking forward to it. I did want to ask you a question before we jump to your presentation. It feels to me like, Dr. Townsend, that we're living in unprecedented times, and maybe that's just the immediacy of my own stresses, but it feels like we're just really stressed out. Are you noticing that in your practice? You've been around practicing for a while. Is this just normal, or is this different?
Well, it's different. But it's a convergence of a bunch of problems, right? Like, we are living in a pandemic. Right. Let's be real. Like, that doesn't happen, but every 100 years. So
exactly.
So it is a different time, but we also live in an information age. This is the first time where humans have a lot of access to information that actually they have no control over, no ability to change. And yet we can sit for hours watching it. And so it's inducing more and more anxiety. Humans, we kind of evolved just dealing with our issues in our day-to-day moments. Yeah. But now we have access to tons of information, but we have a lot less control over most of it. So I think that's upping the anxiety as well.
It feels like it. And I'm hoping that as we go along, and you mentioned, figuring out and evolving and stuff, that we find this happy medium. But I know for me, it just feels like we're living in an interesting, to say the least, time, and maybe a time of added stress. So we're excited. This topic is very timely, it feels like. And like I said, personally, I'm looking forward to learning from you. So Dr. Townsend, without much further ado, I am going to turn the time over to you, and we're looking forward to learning from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody. So good to be with you. And this is one of the places, it's so funny, my career, it's just weird how your career eventually comes full circle. I started out when I was pretty young working for a company called Franklin Covey Company. Stephen Covey, if you may remember, wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I got hired as one of the youngest consultants in that company. I was about 25 at the time. And my job was to go out and teach executives how to deal with difficult people, basically, how to manage leadership issues, how to manage people. But I remember when I was auditioning and I got this opportunity, I was really young, and I was really young looking. So I remember, as part of the hiring process, I had to speak in front of about 50 sales reps who would be selling my services to all of their clients. And one of the questions that the HR rep asked everybody is, will you hire Matt to go speak to your senior executives, this young guy? And they said yes, they would. And part of that was just because I had already worked deeply in the content. I helped write books for the Franklin Covey Company and with Stephen Covey. So they knew I knew the content, but I was always so preoccupied with how young I looked. Oh, wouldn't that be a great problem for us to have right now? Because now I sit here and I'm 53 years old and I'm feeling old. And now all of a sudden I'd give anything to have that youth that I used to have. And part of what we're going to talk about today is some of the latest research on what truly drives happy people, what truly drives healthy people. So a lot of this content is going to come from a book that I'd highly suggest you go get. by a guy named Sean Acor. The name of the book is called The Happiness Advantage. And what they're finding out, and this is kind of what my experience, my degrees are in. So I have a bachelor's degree in communications. I have a master's degree in conflict resolution. Basically, I have another master's degree in human development, and I have a PhD in human systems and how we create habits and patterns and systems as humans. And so a lot of what my specialty is in creating change and helping people change, and also helping people manage some of their habit patterns. And one of the things we're going to get into today are some of the habits that a lot of us create or have and have been using our entire life. But some of these habits create a lot of anxiety, which is, as Kyle talked about earlier, it's what's inducing some of this anxiety in us. And I'm just going to go through some of the latest research, but there's a huge movement going on, and I'm sure you've been seeing part of it. The movement I'm talking about is this movement about positive psychology. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you here. Oopsie. And as we get into this, what I want you to do is to be learning everything you can today about what you need to do to create more happiness. So this movement of positive psychology has been going about 40 years or so. It's been pretty much pioneered by a guy named Marty Seligman, who interestingly was one of the psychologists for the Stanford swim team at one time. But what he was trying to figure out in psychology, what we tend to do is we spend a lot of time studying abnormal psychology. We study people that do odd things, and we try to figure out why they're doing odd things, or any type of disordered behavior, or any type of dysfunctional behavior. And historically, that's what we've studied. So we've gotten really good at studying kind of broken people for most of the study of psychology. But about the last 40 years, psychologists started asking a different question. So instead of trying to figure out what's disordered, they wanted to figure out what makes someone healthy, what makes someone happy. And they started to intentionally do what they call positive psychology, meaning focusing on the people that are having the positive results, not just the people that are having the less than positive results, okay? And that created a huge movement called positive psychology. And a lot of times in the news today, when you're hearing about any kind of psychology that's making the news, it's usually coming from the field of positive psychology. That's why you now hear a lot more talk about grit and people having grit or resiliency. That's why you hear a lot of people talking about mindfulness, which is kind of a Buddhist approach to positive psychology. You might also be hearing a lot of focus nowadays on happiness. Instead of just getting into all the disorders, now what they're studying is, what do happy people do? And is what they're doing different than those that don't see themselves as happy? And how are they different? So today, what I'm going to share with you are some of the research, but they're really powerful. And what I found from my own life, it's changed me. It's full on changed me. Now, I've been basically working with people for about 25 years, coaching them, training, writing books, developing content, designing workshops to help people create a happier, healthier life. And as part of that, I've gotten way deep into a lot of studies about anxiety, a lot of studies about depression, a lot of studies about ADHD. And the reason is because I have people in my office that need to overcome this stuff. And instead of just only thinking that we have to medicate these things, it's a great thing. If we need to medicate, we medicate. But there's also a lot of really amazing things we can do. And when we start to do what works, pretty amazing things happen that make things turn more positively, right? And when we don't do what works, we tend to keep perpetuating habits that don't work. And this was happening in my own life. So for years, I've had a radio show, okay? I had a radio show locally here in Utah on KSL radio for about 5.5 years. Then I went to it's called BYU radio. And I had a radio show on BYU radio, which was a nationally syndicated show. It was 3 hours a day. And I did that for another 5.5 years. Plus, on top of that, I'd come after I do my radio show in the morning and run my team of 12 people. I'd come home about 3:00, not home. I'd go to my office and I'd start seeing clients till about 6 or 7:00. I would also travel around the country and speak all over the place. So I was literally at the top of my game. Everything was so good. I was doing everything I ever wanted to do, but I was dying. I was falling apart. And what was happening to me is I wasn't able to thrive. I wasn't in a state of flow. I wasn't in a state of optimal experience, even though I was doing everything I loved to do and I felt called to do. And I'd have a guest after guest on my radio show talking about all of these things. In fact, if you want, you can go to iHeartRadio and find my podcast, The Matt Townsend Show. But I interviewed the greatest. I interviewed everyone you can imagine, but I ended up one day in the hospital. We had just gone to Texas Roadhouse. Have you ever been to a Texas Roadhouse? And at this Texas Roadhouse, it was my birthday, so somebody sent us a bloomin' onion, and plus my kids ordered a bloomin' onion, so we had bloomin' onions blooming all over the place. And while we were sitting there, it was the craziest thing. As I was eating, I started feeling like a pressure right here. And I'm like, oh my heck, I'm going to have a heart attack. So after we were done eating, I went home and I just kept feeling this pressure. And I was up all night long with this pressure right here in the middle of just in the middle of my rib cage. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I thought I was in pretty good health, but I had been burning the candle at both ends. Well, long story short, I had a friend of mine, a doctor, come over to my house the next morning. He lived across the street, an emergency room physician. And I was telling him what was going on. And I was telling him that I could feel a pain in my shoulder in the back and that I had a lot of pressure here. And first I thought I was like passing a kidney stone, because one time I passed a kidney stone and that also impacted me in my chest a little bit, and which I thought was kind of weird. So I thought that was what was going on. And he looked at me and he said indirectly, what have you had to eat today? And I'm like, oh, I had a bloomin' onion. And he said, what else did you eat there? And I told him about everything I had eaten. And he goes, I think you're having gallstones. I think you're having a gallbladder attack. And I'm like, oh, really? And by the way, during the night, if I moved around certain ways, it would clear up and I wouldn't feel the pain. Well, I didn't want to go to the emergency room if there's not going to be able to do something about it. But he just kind of said, well, you probably ought to go in. And I'm like, oh, but they're going to make me wait in line. And he goes, I've got a really great trick for you. Just right when you walk in as a 50-year-old man, just walk in and kind of grab your chest. And when you walk in and grab your chest in an emergency room and you're a 50-year-old white man or whatever, they're going to look at you and they're going to think heart attack. And when they ask you what's going on, just say, oh, I'm feeling pain, and then touch your shoulder, left shoulder, by the way. But my pain was on both shoulders. Anyway, long story short, I walk in, grab my chest. They look right at me. You have pain there? I'm like, uh-huh. And they get me right into the emergency room and I'm immediately seen. 2 seconds later, I'm pretty much naked and I'm totally tied onto a machine and they're checking my heart. And 2 minutes after that, they realized I wasn't having a heart attack. And 2 minutes after that, I didn't see anybody for about 7 hours as I waited in the emergency room. They put me on some morphine and I just went to bed and had a really good sleep. And I was in the hospital for 2 days. And when I was in the hospital, I learned something really incredible. Okay. While I'm there on a little bit of a morphine drip and they were running a bunch of tests, they basically were telling me that you've got gallstones and you're going to probably need to have your gallbladder removed, but we can't do it now. So we'll set up a surgical appointment and you can go do that. Well, here's what happened to me. Once they took me off the morphine, I started thinking to myself, what is the deal? I'm happier than I've ever been. Really, as far as my life is concerned, I'm doing everything I want to do, but I'm sick as a dog. And I noticed that my body was telling me that what I'm doing isn't working. And so I had been thinking about quitting my radio show, which I love to do, but it was killing me because I'd have to be up at 6 a.m. and it was just adding a lot of stress to my life. And what I'm about to show you for the next 45 minutes is what helped me understand what changes to make and how to make those changes. And it literally changed my life around, where not only was I fulfilling my mission, but I was actually healthy and strong mentally and physically. And even more importantly, I was happy. I wasn't just challenged and having fun and knocking it out of the park. And I wasn't just making money. I was happy. So the principles we're going to talk about are that happiness. And one of the first things that I learned about happiness is everybody's picture of what health looks like is different. Okay. When I went home, I took my family to a pool, a swimming pool, and we were having a kind of a vacation. And one of my kids challenged me to a race in the pool. And I realized that after like 3 or 4 seconds of swimming, I don't know how to swim. I'm more of a drowning person than a swimming person. And I realized I was out of shape, and I realized I wasn't feeling good. And my son lapped me, and he came back and he was just laughing. And he's like, "Dad, that was pretty pathetic." And I'm like, you know what? You're so true. So right then I decided I'm going to exercise. And what I did is I wanted to learn to swim because I had never really felt comfortable swimming. So I looked up online, just videos on YouTube about swimming. And the more swimming videos I watched, the more I learned about swimming, and I learned about the right strokes and the proper strokes. But I realized too, I had a hard time breathing. I didn't know how to get my breathing straight. So, and a lot of you are athletes, right? That know how to do all this. You're pros at this. I hadn't learned this ever. And I saw a video of Michael Phelps, and Michael Phelps was wearing this crazy tube, a snorkel, to practice his swimming in. And I didn't know you could do that. I thought that was violating the swimming rules. But he was doing it, and it was changing his ability to practice and breathe and make the stroke perfect. So I decided I'm going to get a snorkel like that. The first day I swam, I could really only swim 3 or 4 laps. And the whole time my lungs were burning, and I was just having a really hard time breathing. But when I put that snorkel on, a few weeks later, I was able to do 74 laps without stopping. Pretty much consistently going. And I just talked to my swim coach the other day, and she said, "Matt, you're doing such a great job. If you keep this progress up, we're going to let you go move to the big pool. And then I'm going to be able to go swim in the big pool. Right now, I'm just swimming the 76 laps in the little kid pool. But someday I'm going to get to the big pool." The rule that I learned, though, is that I can swim. I can now swim a mile without a problem. And I can swim a mile without a snorkel. And it is the best exercise ever because nobody can bother me. So I started to change my life. And when I left the hospital and I started thinking about it, I had to decide, should I be a radio show host? Is this what I need to do? And one of the questions I asked myself was a simple question: how much money would I pay right now to have my radio show? If I didn't have it, how much would I pay out of pocket to go get my brand new radio show up and running with 12 producers helping me do 3 hours of radio a day? And you know what my answer was? I wouldn't pay a dime. I wouldn't pay any money for it. So what does that tell me? Then why am I doing it? Well, why I'm doing it is because I made a commitment 5.5 years ago, and I thought it was part of what I needed for my life. But I found out after doing it for a while, it really wasn't. So I quit my radio show, and that allowed me to swim every morning. And that allowed me to go do more writing. And that allowed me to be with my family more. And that allowed me to start to create these ABCs of happiness. Instead of looking like this poor guy in the bed, that's a picture of health, right? I was actually a little bit more like Michael Phelps. I didn't quite have those muscles, by the way, but man, look at that shoulder. Unbelievable. But I also didn't have to be this guy. I could be healthy. I could be strong. And all of it was simply in me clearing my head. And in clearing my head, I eliminated a lot of my anxieties, my worries. I eliminated my up and down flow of my life. And I started to take my life back. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, are what we call the ABCs of happiness. Now, For untold generations, this is Sean Acor from the book, The Happiness Advantage. This is how we're going to turn happiness upside down. For untold generations, we have been basically led to believe that happiness orbited around success, that if we work hard enough, we would be successful. And only if we are successful would we be happy. But what they're finding out, folks, in the research is the exact opposite is true. It's not that you have to accomplish something to be successful and then you'll be happy. What they're finding out is happiness is its own thing. It doesn't come because you've accomplished something. Happiness doesn't come when you finally get the grades. Happiness doesn't come when you finally get the college, graduation. Happiness doesn't come when you finally get that good job making six figures. It doesn't come in certain situations. It doesn't come when you're finally married. Happiness doesn't come when you finally have children. Happiness is not contingent on an accomplishment of success. Happiness is itself its own thing. And when we start to create happiness, oddly, success follows. Success at home, success with family and friends, success at work, success financially happens after happiness is created. Does that make sense? So as we get into this, part of what we have to look at is what really makes somebody happy. Look at some of these statistics. 48% of Americans consider themselves very happy. When you look at that, isn't that a crazy stat? Only 48% consider themselves happy? Isn't that wild? To me, that just blows my mind. How could that be? 33% of Americans say they're very happy with their jobs. Are you guys very happy with your jobs? That means 66% of people that are working aren't very happy. But we're doing it every day. That's what I was doing with my radio show. Another idea. The happiest careers, clergy, interestingly, are happier. Firefighters and reservation agents. That's so sad. Some people are in churches that don't pay clergy. How are you ever going to make a living? I remember I was told in high school that my aptitude was to be a member of the clergy. What? That won't work. Check this out. People that live in larger metropolis areas are happier than those that live in rural areas. Do you believe that? It's interesting, right? This is just the research on happiness. Income above $75,000 doesn't correlate to happier people. If you want more happiness in your life, it's not making more money. You need to have about $75,000. Up to $75,000, happiness correlates to money. After that, more money doesn't make you happier. In fact, a lot of times, more money causes more problems. Healthier people are 20% happier than those with average health. So if you're in shape, if you're participating in the Huntsman Games, it's probably going to create more happiness for you. The happiest average ages on average, oh, this blew my mind, are 18, right? Because they're clueless, and 73 years of age. Why is it 73? Some of you out there might be 73. You're loving it. You've hit the happiest age. Why is that? Is that just right before you blow the hip out? What is that? The least happy ages, by the way, are 58 and 85. But what I'm going to show you is it's not about your age. That is a mindset. So that's what we're going to be getting into as we talk right now, or what I call the ABCs of happiness. There's three things that research has made clear are the biggest drivers to happiness. Happy people, number one, appreciate today. Happy people live today. B, they believe in tomorrow. They have a hope about tomorrow, and they connect deeply with other humans along the way. They appreciate where they are and what's going on. They're present in their lives. They believe in tomorrow, and they connect deeply throughout life with other people. That's what makes people happy. Now, let's give you a bunch of tools behind each and every one of these. Happiness is truly a way that we create success. It is the means to successful life. Not success first, then happiness. Happiness first. And it's almost in a weird way, best to not even seek happiness, but to appreciate today instead. Believe in tomorrow, connect along the way. You do those three things, happiness will emerge. It's an emergent property. Dr. Sean Acor has this great quote: the most accurate term for happiness is the one Aristotle used, which is eudaimonia. Now look at what this means. Eudaimonia does not translate directly to happiness, but instead to human flourishing. What makes a happy human is one that's flourishing, meaning one that's flowering, one that's growing. That's one that's changing and evolving and developing and becoming. Eudaimonia is flourishing. I'm not here to make you smile. My job is to help us flourish. And that's really all that we need to kind of focus on. So ask yourself the question, in your life, are you flourishing? Are you flourishing physically, socially, emotionally, spiritually, financially, mentally? Are you growing? Are you curious? Are you developing? Or are you starting to fade in those areas? When I was in the hospital with the gallbladder attack, I wasn't flourishing. For years, I wasn't fully flourishing. I looked good professionally, but I was struggling in my life and emotionally more than anything, and in my mental health. Let's get into some of this. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm not a huge fan of Tony Robbins, but I like this quote: trade your expectation for appreciation, and the world changes instantly. Expectation is when you have an expectation of what should be happening, versus appreciation simply means you appreciate what is happening right now. You want to change your life? Start to appreciate what's happening right now. Here's one of the gifts. Such a cool study. They did a study and they found out that nuns that expressed faith and optimism in their journals every day were more likely to live longer than those who didn't. Isn't that amazing? Nuns who expressed faith and optimism daily in their journals live longer. One of the keys to living longer is to express the good things and to be grateful for what's happening and to see the good every single day. There's a great story you may have heard of Corrie ten Boom and her sister and Betsy ten Boom, and they were Christians that were helping Jews during World War II. They were captured by the Nazis for basically running an underground, trying to get Jewish people and their families and their kids out of the country. And they eventually got caught. And when they were caught, they were thrown into a concentration camp. And while they were in this concentration camp, they were very Christian, and somebody had smuggled in a Bible into their barracks. Now, the barracks that they were in happened to be infested with fleas. So the fleas would just bite them all night long. It made it so it was hard to sleep. It was hard to be in there. But every night when they would gather around all these people of diverse faiths, all these people of diverse beliefs, they would still go to their Bible and they'd share a verse or two. They'd maybe share a prayer. And every time they would pray, Betsy ten Boom would say a prayer thanking God for the fleas that had infested the barracks. Well, her sister Corrie was getting sick of that, believing that her faith may be keeping the fleas around. Quit doing that. Quit thanking God for the fleas. Why do you keep thanking God for the fleas? And Betsy kept doing it over and over, night after night, until finally Betsy cleared it up for Corrie and said, I have to keep praying for the fleas, because when I pray for the fleas and thank God for the fleas, I also start to see that the fleas are what are keeping the barracks from being searched. And without having the men wouldn't dare go in those barracks because they were so infested. That meant that they could keep their Bible, which meant that they could keep sharing these moments of goodness. We can thank people for fleas. The power and ability of each of us as human beings to find the good in our life every day is going to help us in our mental health. There's a great story by C.S. Lewis, who basically teaches this theory that you've either got to focus on the given gifts or the expected gifts. If you went into the forest and you wanted to make a meal, a dinner, you got two choices, basically. Walk around and just find what's been given and pick it up and go thank God for it and go make that to eat. If it's berries you've been given, it's been given to you, go get it. The other thing you could do is instead sit there before you leave and go try to predict what you should get. You know, you should probably get a deer or a rabbit. You should probably get some mushrooms. You should probably get, just the right kind of herbs to make the deer. Maybe have a pan out there that you can cook it all in. Notice those are all expected gifts. But the research in positive psychology is very clear. When you just accept what is being given to you, you tend to be happier than those that keep expecting something to be given. Right? Appreciate and accept what you have been given instead of expecting and being mad that you weren't given what you were given. That allows you that when you get out there and you see something like a root that you might not normally want to eat, but you found it, you're able to actually appreciate the simplicity of the root instead of being mad that you didn't have something else. How many of people today in this world can't be happy, even though they live in the richest country with the most wealth ever found? The research is very clear that the happiest people on earth aren't necessarily in the United States. They aren't necessarily in the richest countries of the world. The happiest people on average tend to be in more average countries with more average wealth because they've gotten better at just appreciating the given gift instead of what they're expecting. So here's a little happy hack for you. Every single night when you're going to bed, I want you to identify 3 gifts that you received that day. 3 tender mercies, 3 positive things that made your day better. It might be a call from a grandchild. It might be somebody dropped something by, somebody you met or saw them at the store and were able to talk to them. Whatever it is, I want you to go looking for your 3 gifts, and I'd love you to write them down in just a very simple gratitude journal. The research is clear. You want a clearer state of mental health? Start looking for the gifts that you're being given every single day. This next idea has been life-changing to me. Look at all these words I put up on the screen. See them? Creativity, perspective. These, by the way, are what we call character strengths. Judgment, curiosity, honesty, bravery, zest. Look at those words. Do any of those really resonate with you? Are you really curious about the world? Do you have a lot of bravery? Do you have a lot of hope? Are you very humble? These are what we call character strengths. And in positive psychology, what they're finding out is that when we know what our character strengths are, and we live our character strengths, or by the way, they're called your virtues, and you put your virtues in action, you are a happier person. Here's what I mean by that. 93% of people are happiest when they use their character strengths for 10 plus hours a week. And yet only 1 in 4 adults actually do so. Okay. And I don't care what age you are, every human on this earth has character strengths that you're already amazing at living. For example, let me share with you mine. My number 1 character strength is social intelligence. I read people really well. I have a lot of perspective and wisdom. I have a lot of creativity. I'm a very creative person. I can never do any speech the same way twice. I have hope, which means I'm very forward thinking. I have a strong belief in the future. Spirituality is very high for me, which means I can connect to a higher sense of power in life. And I have humor and playfulness. Those are my top strengths. Now, let me let you in on the secret of my life. I knew that I had these things when I was 15. I just didn't know that they were a key to anything. I didn't know that I could have a job as a relationship coach doing what I do. But my social intelligence always drew me there, and my perspective and wisdom. My 7th strength is love of learning. I hated school, but I loved learning. So what I did is naturally, intuitively, I guess, luckily, I lived my strengths. And when I live my strengths every day, it eliminates a lot of my anxiety. It eliminates my worry. I don't need you to just be a talented runner. I need you to know what your strengths are. And then you can use them every day throughout the day. I also would suggest your grandkids need to know what their strengths are. Your coworkers need to know what their strengths are. And then we can hold each other accountable to it. Guess what my lowest strength is? So I'll show you a site. You can go be tested and find out what your strengths are. My lowest strength is what's called self-regulation. I have a really hard time staying on task because I'm too creative, I'm too hopeful, and I'm too out there. So I don't try to just regulate every aspect of my life. The research has shown that by moving my weakness up to a strength won't make me happier. But what will make me happier is living my strengths. So what I do is I always bring my top 5 or 6 strengths to everything I do. When I do this speech, I'm using my 6 strengths, right? And how I stay regulated is I use my social intelligence to know that we've got to be done in 22 minutes. I know I use my perspective and wisdom to remember what it feels like to be on a call too long. I use my creativity to find a way to end this talk, right? I use my spirituality to know that it's important to me to influence you for the time I've got you, but not to take more time than I deserve or should have. And I use my humor and playfulness. I don't have to be a vigilant self-regulator to be happy. I can just use my strengths. So how do we find them? I want you to go to the website, authentichappiness.org, and take the VIA character strengths assessment. Make sense? Pretty simple, eh? I just want you to go in there and figure it out. Somebody, in fact, Drew asked, do strengths naturally change over time, or do they remain firm once identified? A lot of the research on character strengths, by the way, notice what these aren't. These aren't personality traits. These are part of your virtues, your character strengths. And the researchers in positive psychology believe they tend to be pretty fixed in just who you are. And by the way, you're already a ninja at your top 5 or 6. You're already amazingly strong at it. You can improve them. You can adjust them by working on them. But it generally isn't the key to happiness to go change them. But over time, what I've seen, they tend to be pretty stable traits. Each and every one of these traits has been highly researched and is directly correlated to better mental health and happiness. And so they stand alone pretty independently. But I've had, like my kids, I've been taking these tests for about 10 years, and mine have remained pretty strong, stable, the same. This assessment at authentichappiness.org, by the way, it's about 280 questions. It's pretty intensive. And it's going to ask you every which way it can about what you like, what your strengths are, what you do, how do you handle this, how do you handle that. And by the time you're done, you'll have a pretty good sign of what you are. Then what would be really fun is go share these with your partner. Go share these with your friends. Ask your friends and others to tell you where they see you exercising that strength. Put these strengths out there and start using them. If you feel like you're awkward in a situation, go to your strength. The minute I have any difficult situation that I need to engage in, I try to not just freak out and think it's a new situation. I try to go to my social intelligence, my wisdom, my creativity, my hope, my spirituality, my humor. And that way I can always fall back on my virtues. Again, they're called Virtues in Action. AuthenticHappiness.org is the website, but we got to get going because I've got so many more to show you. Great question, Drew, on that, by the way. So once we're appreciating today, appreciating our strengths, appreciating the things we've actually been given, not just bemoaning the fact that life's not where we want it, what we can then start to do is believe in tomorrow. And one of the keys to believing in tomorrow, they're finding out, is this concept about mindset. Here's a great quote by Sean Acor that says, so how do scientists define happiness? Essentially, as an experience of positive emotion, of pleasure combined with a deeper feeling of meaning and purpose. Happiness is positive emotion or pleasure combined with a deeper feeling of meaning and purpose. It's not enough to just have positive emotion and pleasure. You also simultaneously need to have a feeling of meaning in your life and purpose. And one of the keys I found that tends to impact our ability to feel that way is some of this great research by Carol Dweck. Simply put, you guys, every one of us tends to approach life from a different kind of mindset. Some of us have what's called a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is the belief that we're constantly growing into who we are. We can adjust, we can adapt, we can grow. Other people believe that there's kind of a fixed mindset, that you either have certain gifts and strengths or you don't, that you have it or you're not that. Right? So look at the list below. The growth mindset says, I can learn anything I want to learn. The fixed mindset says, I'm either good at it or I'm not. Either you are a math person or you're not. I learned that when I was very young. I had a math teacher that had all my sisters in class, and Townsend struggled with math. Okay. We were all kind of more art people than science people, and in general, right? So I remember taking her class. My sisters had all had her, and every time you wouldn't do well on a test, she'd let you study all weekend and retake it the next Monday. So she asked if I was ready to retake my test, and I had studied, but I just was so sick of it. And in fact, that weekend I talked to my mom, and I'm like, I hate math. Math is stupid. And this is what my mom did. And she didn't mean to do this, but she got in my head a fixed mindset. She said, Matt, we're Townsends. Townsends aren't math people. We don't do math. Grandpa didn't do math. Dad didn't do math. I don't do math. We're not math people. And I'm like, really? Why didn't somebody tell me that? Why am I stressed about math then? It's almost like she diagnosed me, right, with some diagnosis named after someone. So it was like, you got Parkinson's. So I had Townsend's. Townsend's means we're not math people. So I didn't study the rest of the weekend. I went into Mrs. Larson. I'll never forget it. She goes, Matt, are you ready to take the test? And I'm like, I went up to her and I was kind of quiet. I'm like, you know what? I found out some bad news. I'm a Townsend. And I don't know if you know this, but we're not math people. We don't do math. And I'll never forget it. She was looking over her glasses at me, and she stuck her portly little finger right into my chest. And she says, I know, by the way, but this Townsend, and she poked in my chest, this Townsend's going to learn math. Huh? She was trying to teach me that it's a growth mindset. You're not just born knowing everything and being good at everything. So if you can believe you can learn, then it changes you. If you have a growth mindset, when I'm frustrated, I just try harder. When I have a fixed mindset and I'm frustrated, I give up. It's not meant to be. When I have a growth mindset, I want to challenge myself. Fixed mindset, I don't want to be challenged. I don't like it. Growth mindset, when I fail, I learn. Fixed mindset, when I fail, I'm a loser. I'm no good. Growth mindset, tell me I try hard. Fixed mindset, we want people to tell us we're smart. See, that very idea that you're smart or you're gorgeous, right? Or you're just so amazing that's, I guess, something, but what does it mean? Instead, tell me what I've done. Your work ethic to go run that race is amazing. I'm so proud of you. That's a thing I can do, right? If you succeed, I'm inspired. But if I have a fixed mindset, if you succeed, then I feel threatened. Zero sum, right? We all can't win. My effort and attitude determine everything. My abilities determine everything. So a little homework assignment I want you to do is I want you to go start to see if you can see in your life where you've had a fixed mindset. What's something that you have mentally limited yourself from doing because you simply didn't think you could do it? Now, there are some things we physically may not be able to do, right? I'm probably not going to be a professional football player right now, but it doesn't mean that I can't do a million other things. Doesn't mean I can't participate in the Huntsman Games, right? So just go start to look at it and see if you can't start to incorporate some growing ideas into those things that used to make you believe you can't do it. Some of you out there believe you're not a public speaker. Public speaking is something you can actually learn to do, believe it or not. Another key to this, in order to be able to believe in tomorrow, are these questions. And some of these questions are so important, especially as we're going through a lot of the chaos that we see in this world today. I want you to imagine that you just found out, and this sounds heavy, but just trust me on this. Imagine that you just found out that you're dying, okay? You got a terminal illness, you're dying. Watch how interesting this is. If you're dying and you knew you had 2 years to live, what would you do differently? Right? What would you make sure you do every day? What would you kind of quit doing? What would you for sure quit doing? Who would you make sure is around you if you knew you had 2 years to live? Watch this question. If you had 2 months to live, now what would you do? Would you quit your job? What would you do? Move into a monastery? What would you do? Notice the very simple question that you get to explore about how, if you have 2 years to live, what would you do? That starts to help you align your life a little bit more. And this is a great activity to sit down with you, your partner, your family, your friends, and start to have these conversations. If you only had 2 weeks to live, what would you do? What would you make sure you were doing every single day? Who would be around you? Who would be with you? What would you not have around you? What would you not do? And if you had 2 hours to live, what would you do? There's power in getting very clear about what matters most. And it's so much easier to say no to everything else in the world if we're really clear what our yeses are. This is the way you figure out what your yeses are. One of the reasons I was able and wanting to quit my radio show is because I went through a similar activity like this. And it helped me figure out that in the end, I wouldn't want to spend more time on the radio. I really wouldn't. I'd want to spend more time with my family. I'd want to spend more time actually changing lives one by one. And I did it. And weirdly, what it created in me was a whole lot of peace. Last but not least is the C. We got to connect deeply with the others around us, right? So who makes your life worth living? Dr. Brene Brown has a great quote here. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationships. Are you seeing the people around you? Are you hearing them? Are you valuing them? I just did a TED talk, a TEDx talk for BYU TEDx. And so if you just go Google Matt Townsend, BYU TEDx, it's a 12-minute talk about what we can do to do, I call it get real with the people around us, to have real conversations with them so that they feel like you see them, you hear them, you get them. And it's just a really fun 12-minute talk. You can go check that out and maybe start sharing that with the people around you, with your kids, just as a way to show them that I do hear you. I need to be better at this. And I went to a workshop today where I'm trying to learn to connect more deeply with you. There's another really awesome tool here that we've got to start to do. And this is the weirdest thing. One of the reasons this world's so darned anxious is because we're all numbing ourselves to death, right? We literally are. We have more ways to numb ourselves. It's crazy. Happiness appears in our lives when we engage our lives, and we the things that we look at this cool quote. What you avoid imprisons you, right? We must learn to face our lives openly. If we are constantly running, escaping, and trying to numb ourselves, and we're using a lot of technology to numb ourselves, why do we want to escape from this life? By numbing. We've got to learn to turn off the numbing. You want to hear the craziest statistic? Do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing? That bomb blew up. Those 2 bombs or 3 bombs, I think, went off and killed people. And you remember that whole event? They did research around that event, and they found that people that were on the ground during that bombing and compared the people that were in the bombing, around the bombing, to the people that were home watching 4 or more hours of the coverage on the news networks, okay, the cable news networks. And this is what they found out. If you watched 4 or more hours of coverage on the bombing, you were more likely to suffer signs of PTSD than the actual victims on the ground in the bombing. You know why? Because human beings aren't wired to see trauma in everyone else's lives and not act on it. And that amps us up. You want the number one way to change your mental health? Turn off the news. You actually don't need it. Turn it off. All it does is turn on your fight or flight constantly. We are not wired as human beings to worry about something going on in Boston. We are wired to be present in where you are right now. And the minute you turn your mind to Boston, you're in trouble, anxiety-wise. Another rule is the minute you get in your head and you're focusing too much on tomorrow, you're going to have anxiety. If you focus too much on yesterday, you're going to have depression, guilt. So human beings, we're not living present. We're the only animal on this earth that's not living present, and it's impacting us. So we've got to learn to get present in our lives. Here's the hack. I want you to start connecting with the people and identify one activity that numbs you out. Think of one thing you do every day where you go to veg. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't go recreate yourself and take a break. Go take a break, but don't go numb. Don't go on social media for an hour. Don't go just watch your favorite news show. Don't just escape in Netflix and binge. If you want to take a break, but use a break that regenerates you, that recreates you. I personally institute some tech-free times. I would for sure try to turn my phone off 2 hours before I'm trying to go to sleep. No screens before I sleep for 2 hours. I found in my own life, when I don't have my phone around, I'm so much better. So I try to walk in the door, plug it in, and then walk away from it. And the more I'm away from it, the better off I am. Usually when I'm numbing, I'm trying to avoid life. And here's the last thing, you guys. We've got to quit. We got to learn to distinguish between smoke and fire. Okay. Smoke is everything in our relationships that we fight about. I wrote a whole book on this called Starved Stuff. But wherever there's smoke, there's always fire. Fire is the stuff that actually causes the pain. In a relationship where you're seeing a lot of tension and you're fighting about money and kids and sex and all these things, let me promise you, there is a secret that's underneath this, where there's 7 needs that every human needs to have met. Those needs I call the starved stuff. Every human needs to feel safe. Every human needs to feel trusted and appreciated and respected. Every human being needs to feel validated, encouraged, and to know you're dedicated to them. Anytime those needs aren't met, you're going to see smoke. If you want relationships to last, we need to get out of the smoke and quit fighting about the silly stuff and understand that there's a starved issue underneath. And the sooner you pay attention to the starved issue, the sooner you'll eliminate the smoke. Here's an example. My wife and I went to Maui, and I did a speech in Maui. And while I was there, before we left, my wife went to Costco. Have you ever been to Costco? It's a really cool thing. And she bought me a pair of shorts. Okay. Shorts I had never seen before. They were cargo shorts with pockets on the side, and they had tie strings on them, so you could tie your knees. And she bought them for me, and I didn't see them. We packed them, and boom, we were in Hawaii. And what I like to do when I get to Hawaii or anywhere like that is I like to just go run out in the sun and get as much sun as I can. Usually I get burned, and then I like to go in my room for days and just watch ESPN and put aloe vera on my body. So my wife was sitting there. It was about day 3. I was all sunburned in watching ESPN. She said, I'm going to go out to the pool. Why don't you wear your new Hawaiian shirt? Because we bought me a Hawaiian shirt and those cool new shorts that I bought you, and meet me at the pool in an hour and we'll go to dinner. I'm like, sweet, see you, babe. And she left. So I just kept watching TV and sweating aloe vera from my burn wounds. And as I'm sitting there, I start getting ready about 5 minutes before I was going to leave. And I put on my Hawaiian shirt, looking really good. And I saw these shorts for the first time. And when I saw them, I saw the ties. And it's the first time I had ever seen ties for your knees. I didn't know we were tying our knees. I thought to myself, I guess we're tying them, because I had never tied my knees before. So I put these shorts on and I started playing with them. And yeah, the knees are supposed to be tied because when you pull on those strings, it tightens your knees. So then I started thinking, well, how tight do you tighten your knees? I've never tightened my knees, but I am in Hawaii and I don't want anything to run up my shorts. So I better cinch them up pretty tight, I thought. So then I'm trying to cinch them up tight, but then I'm thinking, do you tie them above the knee or do you tie them below the knee? By the way, this is why I should have gotten dressed with my wife there. That would have been better, but I didn't. So I'm just trying to figure this out with my own little man logic in my head. And I start to tie them really tight below my knee. And it's almost like you're not supposed to tie them because there's not a lot of tie to tie, but I made it work, by golly. And I went and I finally was all done, sweating bullets, and went and I got my camera, had my pants all tied up, got my fanny pack on, and was ready to go. And when I was walking out of my hotel room, I got this weird like prompting, okay? And the prompting said basically, you don't want to look stupid. And I'm like, you are so right. So I left my fanny pack because I didn't want to look like an idiot. And so I left my fanny pack and I went out all cinched up. And when I walked out, it was that really cool time in like in any kind of tropical area when there's that orange glow on everyone and everyone looks really good. And I knew that because when I walked out, everyone was checking me out. And I got on the elevator and there was these two cute little old ladies that were just looking me up and down. And I'm like, eyes up here, ladies. And we got on the elevator and we went down the elevator and they couldn't get off fast enough. And then I walked out to the pool looking for my queen. And I saw her across the pool and she was reading a book. And I saw her look over the book and then she hurried and lifted the book up. And I'm like, well, that's strange. I thought she saw me because I was waving to her. And she lifted the book up. And then I got closer to her and I could see her looking over and then she lifted the book up. And I was like, what's going on with this? Anyway, I got closer and she puts the book down a little bit and she shakes her head no and puts the book up. So now I'm starting to feel disrespected and unappreciated and unsafe. Now I'm starting to feel starved. And by the way, apparently she was too. And so I get closer and I'm like, hey, and she's like, oh, what are you doing with that tone? And I'm like, what? How about hello, you big stud? You look hot in your gear. And she didn't do that. She was like, no. And I'm like, no, what? She's like, Matt, look at your shorts. And I looked down and they were all cinched up. And she goes, dude, you've got puffy pants. You look ridiculous. I'm not going with you till you let some air out of those shorts, which by the way is the first time she's ever said that. And I'm like, what? And my fight or flight goes off. And my fight or flight is like, crush her. And I started arguing with her. And she's like, Matt, you don't tie your knees. I'm like, yeah, you do, Marty. Why would they put ties if you weren't supposed to tie them? She's like, look around, Matt. Do you see anybody with their knees tied up? That day, by the way, no one had tied their knees up. Weirdest thing. So I'm sitting there thinking in my head, I can't feel my feet, but I can't let my air out because I'm supposed to fight this issue. So we got in a fight about my shorts. But what was the real issue? She was feeling socially unsafe. I was feeling physically, emotionally unsafe. She was feeling unappreciated, disrespected. I was feeling disrespected. There wasn't encouragement going on. We didn't seem to trust each other on this issue. And we fought until finally I'm like, okay, fine. I'll let the air out. Then we'll go to dinner. But when we go back, we're going to go back and I'm going to show you online. You're supposed to tie your knees. And she said kind of flippantly, oh yeah, let's do that. We'll go to courtjesters.com and we'll buy you the whole ensemble. We'll get you the hat with the bells and the curly toe boots. So rude. Every one of us wants to connect. We all want to feel safe, trusted, appreciated, respected. Don't you? Don't you want to feel validated and encouraged? Those are the basic needs of human beings. And you know what? That's what we can do for each other. So to close this up, let me just show you 3 keys for connection with others. Okay. They're very simple. Be positive with each other. Human beings are so drawn to positivity. Anytime you can share positive emotional experiences, it's going to create deeper connection. It's in any moment, by the way. You can even be at a funeral for someone you love and create and share a positive emotional experience. The way you do that is you bring positive energy, support, validation, and openness and safety, some laughter. Bring positivity to your relationships. The research is clear. People that are positive create more peace. The next thing to bring is synchrony. Human beings are wired to get in sync with other human beings. That's why when you see someone fall, you startle. That's why when you see someone cry, you start to cry. We as humans need to start paying attention to others, get more eye to eye, connect with people more, look at them so that our chemistries can what we call share or pair and share. When you see someone else is sad and you're willing to be open and vulnerable to that and connected to it, it will dial you into the exact same emotion in your heart that they're feeling. Human beings are wired to be in sync. That's what creates the feeling of one. And every human on this earth is craving synchrony with one another. And most of us are so interrupted by our technology and our own work and our own radio show that we're not in sync with everyone and we're not being positive with everyone. Last but not least is charity. We need to be invested in the well-being of others. We need to literally try to put prioritize other people, their needs over our needs, not to the detriment of our needs, but we need to learn to serve and to listen and to care and to share and to be warm and to use our character strengths to serve and to lift the people around us. So when you bring positivity to a relationship and you are synchrony and they're present with them and also are looking out for their best interests, you will feel love. That by definition is the definition of what love is. It's positivity, it's synchrony, it's charity. And in the end, you guys, it comes down to the ABCs. Appreciate today, believe in tomorrow, and connect deeply along the way. And when you do that, some pretty amazing things happen to us. Flourishing goes beyond happiness or satisfaction with life. True people who flourish are happy, but that's not the half of it. Beyond feeling good, they're also doing good. They're adding value to the world. You are all adding value to the world. You're inspiring your families with your exercise and your health. You're inspiring other people. You're literally throwing them a lifeline as you throw some positivity, some synchrony, and some charity to those people as well. Now, I'm going to end with this picture. But if you have a bad heart, I want you to look away because this is so powerful. This is a picture of me in my puffy pants. This is so powerful that it could kill you. But let me also leave you with one quote. Gandhi taught, we must become the change we seek in the world. If we want a world that's calmer and more loving and more caring, we need to bring it. If we want to have more appreciation of the present, we need to get good at that. If we want more people believing in tomorrow, we've got to be somebody that believes and knows our strengths and knows what matters most to us. And we also need to be the people, most importantly, that know how to connect deeply with others. Okay. I'm so honored to be with you. I'm more than willing to answer any questions when we're done here. But let me just show you this picture. And then Kyle can come back and boom, look at that. There they are. Boom. Heaven on earth, my friends. By the way, I'm not wearing socks, just so you know. I'm not. It looks like I am. Those are just my ankles that are really white. Thanks, Kyle, for having me.
Dr. Townsend, I'm sorry about it. I'm literally laughing out loud at this shorts story. I love it. I love it.
Aren't they hot?
They're fantastic. I don't understand why this trend did not catch on.
I don't get it. I don't get it. But you know what, by the way, anybody out there with shorts with ties can tie them, and then you're a member of the club.
I have a pair of shorts with ties. I've been wearing them wrong. I have to admit, I've been wearing them wrong. I did not.
Make sure you lift them up above the knee though, because that creates just enough, air pocket to help.
Dr. Townsend, that is fantastic. Incredible information. Just as Dr. Townsend mentioned, if you have any additional questions, thank you to Doug for speaking up earlier. Go ahead and drop those in the Q&A. If you're joining us by Facebook Live, please feel free to throw it in the comment. I don't necessarily have a question, but Dr. Townsend, one or two things that just really stood out to me. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. I love that you shared this idea of positive psychology, and I didn't realize there was a term for it, but I certainly have noticed that there's a lot of study going on. And I think that's so important. Why would we not want to understand how to be happy and have, the success that we're looking for, that is this great life that we're looking for. So right. I love that. I wrote down a few quotes. I won't share them all, but I really like the concept of happiness is not contingent on an event. What an important lesson. If we can internalize that and understand that, I think that'll take us a long ways. We do have a question here. Let's get that answered. It says, what if you've been through a very difficult time, a death, for example? Where do you start?
So great. By the way, because the research is so clear, death's going to happen. And yet, whenever we deal with death, we can always just kind of default back to the ABCs. Appreciate what is, appreciate today. So the loss of somebody, but what you could do is spend some time getting deeply into how did they bless your life? How did they elevate your life? What other relationships can you bless that are also suffering from this death? What can you do today to appreciate it? What can you do right now? Go through some of those assignments or activities about what do you need to prioritize or reprioritize because of this death that will start to give you a leg up, a powerful future, an opportunity to do more, a way to care for another person? Is there something you're being called to do now? Another thing I might do is get to connection. I might go find somebody that is, Brene Brown calls them your help me bury the person. That's the person that you can just call in an instant, say, get over to my house. I need you to help me bury a person, or I need you to help me move a body. And if we have to move a body, we all need that one person. So whoever asked this question, who's that one person in your life or do we need to find one that you can go right now to, that they'll just hold the pain you're going through? They won't fix it. They won't correct it. They'll just let you share and grow. And then maybe as you start to find the 3 blessings today and the 3 blessings tomorrow and the 3 gifts the next day, start looking for signs that of how your life has still been blessed and being blessed every day by this person. That's probably where I would start. But I'd also wouldn't try not to grieve, right? Grief is essential. It's normal. It's healthy. One of the key things I would do too is I'd probably spend a lot of time writing. A lot of times what we do is we stuff it and we don't talk about it. So if our mind can't get the ideas out, then they tend to stay and we ruminate. So I think if you could be expressing them either verbally or writing them, that would help.
Great advice. It's about the basics, right? ABCs, coming back to the basics. Fantastic. Wonderful information. 2 more quick things. Yeah. I really loved your happiness hacks. I thought those were great. Good, solid advice. I loved your emergency room tip. I hope that I will never have to do that.
Yeah, just grab your chest.
However, I'm glad
I'll get you right in.
I'm glad to know.
Every time.
I'm glad to know. Well, wonderful. It looks like we've had a chance to answer most of the questions that we have. Dr. Townsend, once again, thank you. I take that back. There is one other question. Will this recording be available on our website? It will indeed. At seniorgames.net, you'll be able to watch this entire thing. The presentation will be there, and we encourage you to go back and watch it again. Great information. Dr. Townsend, I want to issue a challenge to you. You gave us a homework assignment or 2 that I plan on trying to implement. Yeah. You need to register for the Huntsman World Senior Games in the swimming event.
I totally do. Oh my gosh. Do they let you wear a snorkel?
Yes. Yeah, that snorkel that you had.
My kids call it a dorkle, but what do they know? I'm gonna look into that. When is it, by the way, this year?
So swimming, I happened to look this up because I thought you might ask me. It is on Wednesday, October 6th is the first day of swimming, and it's a 3-day event. So there's different events that happen on the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th. Seniorgames.net. Check that out. Okay. We'd love to have you come down, experience the games, and interact with some of those that joined us today. But
I'm the guy that looks like Michael Phelps in a Speedo.
We'll keep our eye open. We'll keep our eye open for you.
See if you can find me.
Anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Townsend, for joining us. Great information. All the best to everything that you're working on.
Thank you.
We want to also thank you all for joining us today as well. If you enjoyed the webinar, and I know I sure did, we want you to go ahead and tell your friends about it. Living Your Best Life webinar series. It's available once again on our website at seniorgames.net. Be sure to join us next month when we visit with Teresa Willie. She's going to share another very important topic. Her presentation is called Break the Silence, Start Talking Openly About Suicide. This webinar takes place on Thursday, September 16th, 2021, of course, at high noon Mountain Daylight Time. And until we meet again, get out there and live your best life. Thanks, everyone.